There are few things more important than food. The food we grow and eat informs every part of our cities, our communities, and ourselves. But in the last few decades, a small number of major corporations are now controlling the vast majority of our food distribution, which in turn has devastating effects on workers, the environment, and even the long-term stability of our food supply. So in a world of global food monopolies, how can we future-proof food? First, we should explain, what exactly is a food monopoly?
Over the past couple of decades, our food system has become very globalized, and it's molded itself around these ideas of efficiency and keeping costs really low. And as a result of that, we've seen an emergence of a concentrated food industry where you've got some mega corporations that basically control a lot of the food industry.
Laura says one place you see the enduring impact of food monopolies is the meat industry.
So you've got, in the US, for example, just a handful, just 4 companies that control the vast majority of the meat industry.
And because there's fewer companies to buy from, this pushes prices up for consumers.
You can see the environmental impacts of what's happening with farmers changing their methods, with industrialized farming becoming a bigger issue here. And you can see farmers themselves struggling because they have fewer suppliers or fewer buyers for their products, so they're forced to accept lower prices. So food monopolies really do have this huge impact on the food system, and also create these huge vulnerabilities as supply chains are stretched and increasingly vulnerable to shocks.
Like a global pandemic, for example, and the climate crisis. But food monopolies aren't just in the meat industry. They can be found everywhere, from soda to vegetables to margarine to milk. So how did we get here?
Unfortunately, antitrust laws have been kind of reinterpreted in the US over the last few decades. It makes it harder and harder for government regulators to, break up some of these mergers and acquisitions that are occurring.
According to Phil, you really see the pace of food monopolies accelerate in the 1980s.
In part because of these changes in the interpretation of antitrust laws. And what we're seeing is that some of these firms have bought out so many of their competitors that it's hard to expand within that initial industry. So they expand into other industries.
It's squeezing out smaller, kind of local, regional farms that are trying to provide a decent wage and that are trying to use farming practices that are regenerative or organic or just generally better for the environment.
So how can we reverse the tide of food monopolies in our own communities?
I think one area that we really need to work on is to kind of rejuvenate and invest in local and regional food systems, to try and reduce the vulnerabilities, to make them more resilient, to not be so reliant on this kind of industrialized farming and corporate food.
One example of this is the Urban Farming Institute in Boston, Massachusetts.
Our motto is we don't just grow food, we grow people.
UFI develops and promotes urban agriculture in the city of Boston by engaging residents to grow their own produce. They also teach folks how to grow food in their own communities, thus disrupting the food monopoly ecosystem. And this is only going to become more important over the coming decades, as long as supply chains and maximum efficiency make the industrial food system especially vulnerable to climate shocks.
Actually, as of today, we do that across 7 different farm sites in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, right in the city. We also have 2 greenhouses, and we were able to provide seedlings for our wonderful neighbors as we taught them how to grow food.
But institutions like UFI need the help of state and local governments to survive, and it's not always easy.
More farms, more food. Very simple. I need more land. We've again got 7 farm sites, and out of that, this year, 5 were really the key active ones.
And the issue is more pressing than ever before. Since COVID-19, interest in urban farming and UFI is at an all-time high.
Off the charts. Throughout the nation.
There's been a real kind of push for that local food. And I think that's really interesting because that's one of the main areas where we can build resilience and we can see change if we invest in smaller, local, regional farms.
And even if you're not starting your own urban farm, it doesn't mean you still can't take small steps to reduce the impact of food monopolies.
If you can afford to, looking at what options locally there are to buy food, whether that's a CSA box, whether that's a local farm or other grower that maybe has lost business during the pandemic that you can buy from, or has maybe always sold direct to consumer, they've seen a big increase in interest in what they're doing. I think it's really important that we do where we can, but really it's that systemic change that's going to make the difference.